Evening and welcome to episode 214 of the Gersnet Podcast. I'm John McCallum. This is Gersnet. We're on every week, usually twice a week. Tonight, if you listen to Friday night's show, it was coming to you live from Copenhagen. Tonight it's coming to you from Scotstoun, which is very similar to Copenhagen. The beer's really expensive. There's just not as much Lego and attractive blondes around. This is the independent podcast made by fans for fans. The content is entirely free. Gersnet isn't just a podcast. There is a forum, there are articles, social media, and there's a great history archive there as well. And if you're a regular watcher to the pod, then thanks for coming along. If by chance you're new to us tonight, and some of you might be, then we would encourage you to subscribe. It sometimes is going to be a bit more uplifting than it might be tonight. But please subscribe, share on social media, etc. Okay, so before we get going, I just have to have a quick word about the people who helped make this happen. Forest Precision Engineering are very kind sponsors of the Gersnet podcast. And without their help, we couldn't do this. They are a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company and have been a big commercial sponsor of Rangers for many, many years. And we are all very delighted that they are backing the pod. You can find out more about them at www.forestprecisioneng.com. And the other thing that you might be interested in about them is that they have the fantastic Forest Precision Executive Lounge in the stunning main stand at Ibrox. You can book that. It's a unique space. And if you are interested in finding out a little more about it, email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Okay, we've got a bit to talk about tonight, I think. When I was asked to step in to do this tonight, I thought it was because Colin wasn't well, but actually it's because he hasn't been released on bail since this match this afternoon. The Perth police are maintaining a close eye on him, and they've asked me to step in. I'm joined tonight by Ross and by Patrick Caskey. So on a night when many in our support are baying for blood, Frankie's put together possibly the wokest Gersnet podcast ever. I'm half expecting you two to kind of join us, stop the oil protest halfway through this pod. Anyway, let's see how we got on. We'll put away our oat milk lattes and we'll just have to see what these guys have got to say. So look, I'm just going to jump straight in, Patrick, because you're a guy who likes a stat, okay? And that obviously was a hugely disappointing result today. Did we deserve to lose that match? I read earlier we'd 73% possession, 20 corners to their 0, 29 shots, 7 on target. Was that a game we deserved to lose?
I certainly would say we didn't deserve to lose, but I'm not necessarily sure we deserved to win in a sense. There's a great Twitter account called SR Football. His allegiances lie on the other side of the city, but nonetheless, his stuff is fantastic. And he does, for the past few years, he's done a running expected points league table. And on the basis of expected goals today, we should have come away on average, if you played the game 100 times, with 1.73 points, whereas St. Johnstone come with 0.9. So we were definitely the better team, albeit anecdotally, I don't think anyone would be pleased with what we watched just because it was the dearth of any quality. But I think this game, perhaps in a microcosm, is emblematic of our season as a whole, and Ryan Kent specifically, in the sense that earlier in the week, someone co-opted Opta's table, which said Ryan Kent creates the most chances in Scotland without any sort of qualitative lens or per 90 lens. And today we saw that. We create a lot of chances, but they're not very good at all. So our sort of quantity of shots is great. It's up there. I think it actually beats Celtics, but our quality of shot, so if we look at XG per shot, it is absolutely terrible. And that's emblematic of a team who aren't able to penetrate into the box, revert to headers, which are just low quality chances generally, and long sort of chances from outside the box. Luckily, we got one to actually go well. Tad's shot was really poorly put into net by their keeper. And we sort of were on the unlucky edge of variance where they scored 2 absolutely beautiful goals. It was at the point where I just had to applaud and sort of laugh when Nicky Clark puts that in, because we saw him play decent for Rangers at this time, but nothing at that sort of quality. So to put it sort of simply, I don't think we deserve to lose, but I don't think we can be very hard done by the fact we didn't get 3 points today.
Yeah, I mean, I was being slightly facetious at the start there. It was, in the end, the only stat that matters, as you said yourself, is the goals. And for all our possession, for all, 20 scoring chances, I have to say, I don't remember 20 scoring chances. I know we hit the bar a couple of times, and there was a couple of other close ones, but I'm not sure quite what is class as a scoring chance. But either way, it was a very strange game of football. To have been as dominant as we were in the first 15, 20 minutes. Anybody who's watching Rangers as long as me, or watching football as long as I have, knows that inevitably the other team is going to get a chance. Like you say, the first goal they scored was just one of these freak goals. The boy's never scored a goal before in his life, apparently. And he sticks one away like that. When we saw the teams, Ross, Kolach, again, preferred to Morelos, perhaps not a big change. Sands and Lundstrom, both holding midfielders. Tillman playing a bit further up. Was it the right team to start? I mean, the thing that jumps out at me when I saw it was, do we need two holding midfielders against St Johnstone? Was that the right team?
No, well, I'm not sure. I agree. We don't need, on paper, two holding midfielders against a team like St Johnstone, a team that struggled to score goals. A team that struggled to win games, quite frankly. They've not had a great start to the season. But I actually liked the team that he put out, because I felt Čolak over Morelos was the right call, given everything we've seen in the league this season. I felt it was the right game for Fashion Sakala, who is showing all of his drive and enthusiasm, albeit lack of final quality. But I felt that this was a game that would suit him. Mainly because it's a slightly less cultured opposition than the likes of Liverpool or Napoli. The central midfield question, it seems more out of necessity than anything else. I mean, this manager does not want to play Glenn Kamara, and so given the injuries that we have at the moment, no Ryan Jack, no Yanis Hadji, that kind of thing, I didn't have any issues with his choice of starting 11 at all. In fact, one thing that really pleased me was seeing Ben Davies come back in. So I was happy with the starting 11. And I actually felt the first 10, 15 minutes of the game, it looked like John Lundstrom had been given free rein to be a little bit more dynamic and a bit more box to box. And he was driving forward and creating chances to my eye. Now that changed at some point during the match, and everything just became dull and lifeless and a bit limp. But I felt it was the right team. And we can talk a lot about it. Look, I say it was the right team. I don't think James Sands in an ideal world would be starting for Rangers. He's a squad player. Same with Leon King at this point in his career, with it being very early days. Same with Fashion Sakala. But with where we are with injuries and whatnot, it was we didn't have that many options. I suppose we only had certain configurations of players that we could put out. That being said, that is no excuse for the result today. The team that we put out was more than strong enough to beat St Johnstone. There's not a single player from the St Johnstone starting 11 that I would have put in the Rangers 11 today. And so the fact that we have injuries, the fact that we have to rotate and we're not playing our strongest team, it really doesn't mask the fact that we were unacceptably poor today. And it's a shocking result. It really is.
It was a shocking result. Patrick, you touched upon it a minute ago there about the two goals that St Johnstone scored. The first goal was, as I said, the boy will never score another goal like that again in his life. And the second goal was a nice move. A nice move, good finish. Could we have done more? Ross mentioned there, in an ideal world, Leon King probably wouldn't be starting for Rangers. He's starting for Rangers just now. In all honesty, he's starting for Rangers just now because there isn't anyone else who can play centre half fit at the club. Even Ben Davies clearly isn't fit. He started today, but he didn't finish the game. I don't believe we took him off for tactical reasons. So he must still not be fully match fit. So King is starting. I've seen and read King get some criticism which personally I feel is unfair. Not because he's 18, because actually I think he's been playing quite well. He had a moment today where he slipped, and the boy broke, but I thought he did really well to get back and cover and break up the move. Personally, I think he's been doing okay. So looking at the two goals, and not just looking at King, but looking at the two goals, Patrick, do you feel there was more could be done? Could Rangers have defended them better?
Well, I think if you look at the anatomy of the first goal, there's perhaps 5 or 6 players to blame, and really whoever you dislike the most will probably blame.
I dislike them all tonight, to be fair. So,
but you can pick your choice of Olive, Tavernier, Lundstrom, King. I saw someone trying to blame McGregor. I personally, I would rather see McLaughlin play, so I'll take any opportunity to not speak bad on him, but point out shortcomings, even though he's a legend. But I think it's completely unfair to say that he could have done any better. It was on his weak side, his left side, and he, as you said earlier, the boy Brown hits it fantastically. But I think the first point of call in that first goal especially has to be the turnover of possession. We're 2-on-3, they have an overload on us, but despite this, Lundstrom wants Sakala to come short, but Sakala wants to offer the long option. There's a misalignment of ideas. Lundstrom just plays it short despite Sakala not offering, and then he just stands there. I think it's Montgomery, the Celtic boy on loan, and then progresses the ball, and Lundstrom just stands there for a few seconds, almost just sort of self-pitying, with no sense of urgency, and there's this massive chasm in the centre of the pitch. They gain 30 yards. They put it wide. Tavernier chases it down, fine, tries to boot it out, gets no height on it. They win the ball back. Then I think we have 2 or 3 opportunities to stick a leg in the box. When possession back, we do, but we don't win it and consolidate it. They get the ball, and then eventually, sort of out of luck, but we haven't made ourselves any luck in that situation. The ball goes to their right back, who's marauding in and absolutely bangs into the top corner. So it's sort of 1,000 mistakes into one, and it's sort of an example or emblematic of our team performance in general. Breakdown in communication, lack of technical ability, and fundamentally, as cliche as it sounds, a lack of application and pure graft.
I mean, you described it quite well there. What Lundstrom losing possession in their half in itself, it shouldn't be. We had plenty of opportunities after that to deal with that. But that moment where Lundstrom lost possession, it wasn't so much he lost possession, it was his reaction to losing possession that I think frustrated an awful lot of us. He just seemed to, he take a huff. It was the strangest thing. Lundstrom is one of the senior players in the team. He is certainly, particularly when Goldson is out, he is the player you're looking to alongside Tav. To lead the team. And I felt the thing that was missing, particularly from the first goal, was leadership. Was that person who says, my ball, and just clears it. Tav's clearance, having done the hard stuff and winning it, his clearance was horrendous. And like you say, we had 2 or 3 other bites at the cherry, and nobody just quite, just took control of it. And for all it was a wonder strike, and you have to give the guy credit for that, for the comedy of errors for the ball to actually get to the player in the first place is what has to be looked at. And that's what I think is most frustrating about that goal. The second goal, Patrick, was a different type of goal. It was a lovely finish. But again, we switched off. May was just allowed. I think they'd forgotten you can't be offside from a throw-in. Because they just let him go down there. Now, nice bit of skill from him to get the ball across and bang, suddenly it's a goal. But again, my feeling is there's a lack of leadership. My feeling is somebody taking control. As an 18-year-old centre-half, somebody needs to talk him through games. I remember Stuart Weir, who's on the pod fairly regularly talking, telling a story about meeting and speaking with Walter Smith after Danny Wilson had signed for Liverpool, and saying Liverpool are going to get a fright when they realise Davy Weir's been walking them through every single match he's played. There was some truth in that. You needed that experienced player beside him. I don't feel that Leon King has that just now, and I know I'm specifically looking at Tavernier just now as club captain and as a right back. and somebody that I would expect to step up and show some leadership in that kind of situation. When I say leadership, sometimes you just need to shout at guys so they know what they're meant to be doing. It's easy to switch off in these games. And that's what we did for the second goal, and that was quite disappointing. Okay, enough about St Johnstone and what they did. Ross, there's a predictability to our play just now. We touched upon it before we come on. The definition of madness is to continue doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. We get the ball wide and we put in a cross. That seems to be our tactics just now. Get the ball wide, put in a cross. It doesn't matter if the cross is coming from one of the fullbacks, or it's coming from Sakala, or it's coming from Kent. That seems to be our sole tactic, frankly, just now. And the thing about Scottish teams is they can defend crosses, particularly the types of crosses that we are putting in just now. They're not effective crosses we're putting in. And what worries me a little bit is there doesn't seem to be a plan B. And you touched upon this earlier when you said we were really good for the first half hour or so. We really looked like we were up for this game. I thought it might be a bit like the Aberdeen game last weekend. I thought, right, okay, this is going to be 4-1 and I'm going to get an easy night in the pod. But it became apparent after half an hour that we weren't. One of the frustrations in this was, I think, the guy Considine, Andrew Considine, their centre half. We made him look like Franco Baresi today. The guy was a header and everything and blocking everything, and he's a dumpling. How the hell do we make him look that good? It's frustrating. Malik Tillman could be a player. Okay, he could be a player. There's a player in there, right? Before joining Rangers, he'd played 4 first-team matches of football. Okay, I don't think it's fair to expect somebody with that much inexperience to be the creative fulcrum for Rangers. He's not ready for it. He's there, he's playing. I actually thought in the last 2 games he was unlucky to be taken off because I thought actually he was one of the better players. But I don't think it's fair for him to be the creative fulcrum. So us not having a plan B, this predictability, is that a consequence of losing Hadji, of losing Lawrence and losing Roof to injury and not adequately replacing Aribo? Or is this actually how Gio wants us to play? It's not total football. So what do you think? Is this accidental or is this deliberate?
If it's deliberate, then that's really worrying. If this is Gio's style of play, that's a real concern. It's so far removed from the Van Bronckhorst of Arsenal and Barcelona and of Rangers under Dick Advocaat. It's a million miles away. As you say, it's give the ball to Ryan Kent, let him do a couple of step overs, run into a defender, try and get the ball back. There's Borna Barisic, first time cross. And you mentioned it a minute ago with regards to our defending, that no one's sort of shouting my ball and just hoofing it and getting through it. Andrew Considine did that today. Andrew Considine didn't do that 3 weeks ago when Celtic got a last minute winner at St Johnstone, and he let a cross come in and that's that. But when things aren't going for you, they are not going for you, and that's where Rangers are at the moment. Yeah, you said a moment ago, you stole my line actually, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Excellent. I'm glad I took that from you. It's the high point of the day for me, I have to be honest.
No, fair enough. We had 20 corners today. 20. I think we had 20 outswingers delivered to the penalty spot or there and thereabouts. We didn't have a single short corner. We didn't try anything different. We clearly hadn't worked on any different set pieces. And now I get that with a big lump up top like Cholak, he's a tall, physically imposing guy. Balls into the box should work. But
law of averages, Ross, the law of averages says you have 20, we win at least one of them. But we should win half of them. I mean, it's crazy. And we didn't. We're just giving them the goal kick. We are more dangerous from their goal kicks than we are from our corners. Yes,
exactly. You mentioned then Malik Tillman. Why is Malik Tillman asked to be the creative output? I think losing Lawrence is probably a bigger blow than many of us realised at the time. He probably didn't set the world on fire in the first few weeks of his Rangers career, but he really grew into an important role. He was creative. He was getting goals as well, but he was he looked really, really important to a certain style of play. So losing Lawrence, not good at all. Hadji's been out for, it must be over a year now. And I don't know if he's expected back in, certainly not any time before the World Cup, I understand. So that's not good as well. But it's also the lack of quality that we're seeing from elsewhere. Ryan Kent, today, I've run out of patience with that boy, unfortunately. The lack of quality, the lack of output, the lack of a final ball is unforgivable now. It's causing us real problems. I also feel that we're not getting the same quality down the right flank from James Tavernier. Again, is that because he's not being asked to do the same things that he might have done under Steven Gerrard? I don't know. But we're not getting the same quality of ball coming in from the right from him. Fashion Sakala, again, he has a slightly different style of play, which is get the ball down and run. Unfortunately, he's probably the best runner in the league and the worst passer in the league, in my opinion. So we're just not having enough quality coming from these different areas that it ends up simply being give the ball to Borna Barisic and see if we can get across in the box. Sometimes it works. Today, Andrew Considine cleared up everything that came into his box, and that was that. If this is the style of play, sorry, it's a long-winded answer to your question. I suspect
we've got an hour to fill.
I suspect the reason we're doing this is in large part because of injuries. But it's also due to the lack of quality that we're getting from anywhere else. But if this is the style of play that Van Bronckhorst wants Rangers to demonstrate, and if he has no other idea, no other suggestion, he doesn't seem to like to vary. I felt that the early weeks and months of Van Bronckhorst Rangers' career, we spoke a lot on this podcast about how he was changing games. He was dynamic as a manager. He was changing structures and setups during the game. I think the Dortmund game in Europe last year at Ibrox was a really good example that they were on top in the first half. We made changes at halftime to the structure more so than the personnel, and it changed that game. That doesn't seem to be happening anymore. I don't know why that is. It seems to have really shifted this season for Van Bronckhorst, but it worries me because it suggests kind of desperation and a lack of ideas. And that's not a good position to be in as a Rangers manager.
No, it is not. I read a book recently, a chap called Paul Ferris. Not Paul Ferris, the Glasgow gangster, an entirely different Paul Ferris. Paul Ferris was the youngest ever goal scorer for Newcastle United. Not an Irish guy. And he got injured, 18. Career-ending injury, and he kind of played in the he played at kind of semi-pro level, etc. But he, from a boy for whom great things were hoped, and it's his story. It's quite interesting. He became a physiotherapist at Newcastle, and was part of. He worked under a few different managers there. He worked under Alan Shearer. And if you recall, Alan Shearer was brought in 6 games to go. Newcastle needed 7 points or something to stay up. Newcastle had a good team. It's some very, very good players. And one of the players they had was Michael Owen. And Newcastle's problem was they weren't scoring goals. And keeping Michael Owen fit was a challenge. Michael Owen had a number of ongoing issues. And keeping Michael Owen fit was a challenge. But they had 2 games to go, both winnable. And they sat down with Michael Owen, and after training, Michael Owen said, I can feel something in my, I can't know if it was hamstring, for example. I can feel something in my hamstring. Like, what is it? Have you got, has it gone? Is that, he says, I can't really describe it. He said, but I think it might go. He said, well, with 2 games to go to stay up. He sat down and he said, well, the thing is, I don't have a contract. My contract's up at the end of the season. I don't have another contract after this. So if I play and my hamstring goes, I won't get another contract. So I'm not going to play. So Michael Owen refused to play the last 2 games of that season. Newcastle got relegated. Alan Shearer lost his job, as did this guy Paul Ferris. And you can't just blame Michael Owen for that. But the point I'm making is we have a couple of players, Ryan Kent being one of them, who are out of contract end of the season. Is that? Do you think that's what's at the root of what's wrong with Kent? I know I've gone a wee bit off off the agenda here, Ross. But do you think that's what's at the root of Kent? Because Kent has gone from being one of the most exciting players in the Scottish League to a guy who you almost groan when you see his name on the team sheet now, because you think, this is going to be brutal to watch, because you know what he's going to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And living down here in London, Ryan Kent 3 years ago was one of the names that people that I would work with would know. They'd know Ryan Kent. He's the creative guy. He's the assist guy. I got him from Liverpool, and he'll be back in the Premier League before long. And Ryan Kent's chance of a big money move is long gone now. Do I think that he's just sort of running down his contract? I actually don't believe it's that. I believe he's a confidence player, and I believe his confidence has gone. I have no basis upon which to make that assumption, but that's just how it feels to me.
That's what it looks like.
It feels like he's run out of confidence. He's got no momentum. I think football's a game of momentum, and when you're winning and when things are going right, then things are going really right. And we saw that with the 55 season. Everything just went right, and we had good momentum and we had confidence. So I think that's what it is. He's struggling for goals. When did he last score a goal?
He scored not that long ago, but it was his first goal in a long time.
Right.
Maybe only like 2 or 3 games ago. I can't remember who it was against.
But he's not scoring consistently. I don't think his assist numbers, I don't know, maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I doubt they are anywhere near where they were 2 or 3 years ago when he first came in. And I do just think that that's confidence. I don't think necessarily, I saw someone today saying that defenders have worked out how to play Ryan Kent. Well, you probably don't need to be that clever to work out what Ryan Kent's going to do. He's going to run a bit, and then he's going to cut inside, and then he's going to try and take you on. And if that fails, he's going to pass to the overlapping fullback. I just think he's run out of belief. I wouldn't want to go so far as to say he's run out of hunger or desire, but maybe that's the next step. Unfortunately, if you are a scout now of a Premier League club and you see a performance like that, that does not. If he has in his mind, he said, "I'm not signing a new deal at Rangers, and I'm away at the summer, or I'm even away at Christmas in January." If someone comes in for me, if I'm a scout at a Premier League club, I'm going nowhere near him based on what I've seen this season. Yeah. So his best hope is getting a move to the English Championship, and that's a real waste. So maybe he's got that in the back of his mind as well. Maybe that's affecting him. That's affecting his performances. I think I've seen the pundits on Rangers TV over the past couple of weeks suggesting he's trying too hard. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I just think the boys absolutely run out of belief, run out of confidence. We have no momentum. Things aren't going right for us. And for a winger, I think that particularly is really important.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, he's not hiding, to be fair to him. He's not hiding. But it's just not happening just now for him. Patrick, despite losing 2 goals today and 3 on Wednesday, having 4 defenders out injured, and Davies, as we said, come off against Aberdeen, missed Wednesday, played today, come off again, clearly not fit. I can't help but feel that defending isn't our issue just now. Our issues are further up the field. We're simply not scoring enough goals, and we're not actually creating enough clear-cut chances. I have seen Rangers lose games to teams like St Johnstone before. We all have, and it's often been in games where we've hit the bar. The keeper's had an amazing game. We've done everything but score, and then that that's just one of these games you get in football. I didn't feel that today. The biggest surprise for me today was when Tav scored, because I couldn't see who we were going to get a goal from. Why is that? Why are we not creating chances just now? What's wrong with the midfield and attack?
Well, I think fundamentally it's a personnel issue that goes beyond the structure. We just don't have enough players on the pitch who are capable of scoring. I think there was a plethora of times today when we were hitting the byline and it was Čolak by himself in the box, and you would hope that we'd have the opposite winger, 2 of our midfield, and it's typical of Tavernier earlier in his Rangers career, him in the box as well, and we'd be overloading it with options, whether that be to get the first contact or the second or split it in, but there were times where there's just no one in there. And if you're asking Čolak to sort of fight off 5 large centre-backs and full-backs from St Johnstone, he's never going to be able to do that. He's fairly capable in the air when he's sort of unmarked. He's good at putting headers into the corners, but he's not.
I'm good in the air when I'm unmarked.
Yeah, exactly. So he's very effective at sort of diverting headers into the goals, but he's not going to beat a man per se like Morelos would, or sort of go in the back leg and sort of take him on. But he is a good target if you sort of place it perfectly on him. But I think also another place to look at is the lack of verticality in our play. A lot of our play is just horizontal. A lot of people like to use the sort of trademark, the idea of the horseshoe. To sort of address your earlier question, that's not the intent of the play, but that's just symptomatic of a side who can't penetrate at all and make it to the box. So we need to play around them, and eventually that will end up with us putting a cross in. So it's this lack of penetration, and that comes off the basis of both pass choices, our attacking movement, and to an extent our personnel and the structure that is who's sort of asked to play on the pitch. I think there's sort of a limited sort of flack that can be given towards our strikers because they are just not being given the greatest service. Cholak's outperforming his XG by, I think, almost magnitudes of 2. So there's no complaints of his inability to finish. It's more so our ability to provide for him. I think once we get all our personnel back, hopefully that should be post-World Cup, we'll see some natural increase just because we'll have players who are more willing to take it on, play vertically, try a pass, but I don't think that fixes the problem per se. I also think that allows us to have some rotation with Tillman, because I think at this point we're asking too much of him. He's on loan and he's getting played for Rangers, so he should be putting in his all, but he's younger than me, and we're asking him to do everything. So I think he is sort of testament to the demands and his inability to provide that. It's a bit frustrating that we have to consider sort of perspective and perspicacity. That we might be asking too much of some players, but then others we're asking not that much of, and they're just really not providing. Barrett's such a good example. All we're asking to do is put a ball in the box, and he's putting it 10 yards past and stuff like that. So I do think injuries do have a large sort of effect on our inability to score, but I think there are some structural problems, both to do with the coach and how he sets the team up and who's on the pitch and who we actually just have in the club, and the misalignment between what we want to achieve as fans and what we want to watch, and the inability for us to recruit to do so.
Okay. I thought that was Colack's poorest game for Rangers today. But like you say, I don't think he particularly got the service. There was a couple of times the ball got played through to him and I don't know if it came on his wrong foot or he just wanted to take a touch, but he just wasn't able to get the shot away. And I thought it was actually his poorest game for Rangers today. And like everybody else, I've been enormously impressed by him since he came to the club. He's probably the one success story this season, certainly so far. But I thought today, like a few of them, he had a poor game. Ross, I take you down memory lane. 22nd of October, 1983. Okay, Rangers lost 2-1 at home to Motherwell, in front of a crowd of around 15,000. Okay, after the match, a fairly large crowd gathered outside Edmiston Drive, and voiced their disgruntlement, shall we say, quite forcefully, to the players, the manager, and the board. Later that week, John Greig resigned. And John Greig had an awful lot more in the bank with the Rangers support than our current manager does. Inevitably, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is coming under criticism and coming under pressure. We've 2 games to play until the World Cup break. Then another 4 games before the January window opens. Okay, so put bluntly, do we stick with Gio? Do we hope that we can get through these 2 games and the World Cup break allows us to bring back the creative players that we are clearly missing? I personally think guys like Tav, possibly Lundstrom, and possibly Kent are still fatigued from last season. I don't know if they're maybe carrying knocks. They do not look the same players that they were last season. Perhaps a few weeks off might be exactly what they need. So do we do that, or do we twist? Is now the time to make the decision that it's not working? Let Gio go, find his successor quite quickly, and then give his successor the World Cup break to work with the players, get to know them, so that when we come back in December, he's had a chance. He's had a chance to at least learn who the players are, get into their heads, try and bring back a bit of confidence, look at old games, figure out what we're doing wrong. If it was you, what would you do?
If it was me, I'm firmly in camp Twist. I do not see where the improvement is going to come from under Van Bronckhorst. I do not see any, ethos to his style of play. I don't understand what he's trying to achieve. But I certainly don't trust him with another transfer window. And I know that it's in the modern world, it's not the manager dictating who gets signed and going out and negotiating and buying a player. But the manager has in a structure like ours, a model like ours with a strong director of football role, the manager has a very, very important part to play in that. And I feel that recruitment has been so bad over the last couple of windows that I do not have faith in the manager to adequately identify our weaknesses and, I guess, give a list of requirements to the director of football and the scouting team. I don't see what is to be gained from giving him another 2 games. If we give him another 2 games and he picks up 6 points from 6, do we forgive and forget? Absolutely not. 6 points from 6 is the expectation for this side, for this club. I believe he's lost the vast majority of supporters now. I don't believe that. From everyone that I've spoken to today, I've had 1 or 2 people who think, we'll give him until the World Cup. But that seems to be more out of convenience than anything else. It's just a nice, neatly packaged break time that we can do something. If it's just for convenience, I don't see what we stand to gain by giving him another 2 games. Get someone else in as quickly as possible, give them as much time as possible to work with these players, understand what he needs to do. And I think we are long overdue a root and branch rebuild of this squad. We still, by and large, have the same squad that won us 55, and that is a real problem. I think the hallmark of this Rangers club of the last 18 months has been, for me, stagnation, not really improving in any area at all, as far as I can see. Now,
I think we're a weaker squad than we were 12 months ago. I don't think there's any debate on that. I think the sales of Patterson, Aribo, and Bassey, we haven't replaced any of those players like for like.
Well, I think you could make an argument. Again, let's play devil's advocate and say Patterson and Aribo were never meant to. Patterson and Bassey weren't first choice players. Bassey kind of became first choice, I suppose.
He did.
But their departures weakened the squad. We brought in, obviously, Ridvan Yilmaz, who we haven't seen enough of. And it's a shame and a curious question mark as to why we've not seen enough of Ridvan Yilmaz. We also brought in, am I right in saying, Mateusz Zukowski as right back cover? Where the hell's he gone?
Well, he's in Poland on loan, I think, isn't he?
Is he?
I hear different things. He didn't settle, but he didn't settle in Glasgow and things. I hear that when they saw him play, they didn't think he was any better than Adam Devine, and so they thought, move him out and move Devine up.
But I take the point. The squad is weaker. You could try and make an argument that Lawrence was brought in to replace Joe Aribo. They're not really the same type of player, but you could
I don't think that's unfair, and I think you're right earlier when you said that Lawrence is a bigger miss perhaps than we realise.
Yeah. But I think you're right. The squad is weaker, not just because of those departures, but it's because everyone who stayed is another year, another 18 months older. And when I say that, I mean the likes of Alan McGregor, Stephen Davis, Scott Arfield. We're still relying on these guys far, far, far too heavily. And I made the point last time I was on, players like Scott Arfield, we're seeing him a hell of a lot for a boy who was only signed on for another year because he was such a good presence in the changing room. That's what they said. That was kind of the leaked message via fan media and whatnot when he signed on for another year. Okay, he's not really up to the standard that we need going forwards, but he's a great character to have, and he picks the boys up, and that's why if that's what he was signed on for, we're seeing him far, far, far too much. So the squad itself is weaker because of those who left and weren't sufficiently replaced. but also for those who stayed and haven't, I guess, have degenerated as footballers due to their age. I suppose that paints a real picture of stagnation, of a club that's not moving forward, and a club that won 55 and then stood still whilst Celtic actively went and did quite a dramatic and drastic rebuild. They were forced into that because the manager that they actually wanted turned them down, and then they sort of panicked and brought someone in quickly. It has worked out well for them. We can't argue with that. But it just further highlights the stagnation and the lack of progression at Rangers. Now, if that, for a fan like me, that's the overriding impression I have of the club at the moment, I would urge the board not to stand still at this moment. Do something proactive, take a decisive action, and make a change. I believe that the issues at the club at the moment go beyond the manager. I'm sure we might come on to talk about the director of football, about other problems at the club. But the manager is the public face of the sporting side of the business, I suppose. And the sporting side of the business is the fundamental problem at the moment. It's the public side of the business. And it's the side that is most visibly going wrong. 7 points behind at this time of the season is unacceptable, regardless of injury. I said it earlier today, there is no way that we should be dropping points in a fixture like today's. And I mean, no disrespect to any other team in this league, but when you look at salaries and you look at player experience and the quality that we have available to us, it's unacceptable, particularly when you know you're already 4 points behind, when you know Celtic came back and got 2 late goals yesterday to keep the gap as it was at 4 points. I think the point I'm trying to make is, it looks to me that these players have actually stopped playing for this manager. And again, I don't have any basis upon which to make that assumption, but that's how it feels to me as a fan, is that the manager is not winning over these players. You saw it with John Lundstrom, kind of threw a strop when he gave the ball away. He even made comments last week after the Aberdeen game that maybe we've let this manager down and we haven't kind of given him as much as we could have done. I suspect that's a contributory factor to Ryan Kent's malaise at the moment. It just feels like these players aren't playing for this manager, and if that's the case, he has to go for me. I simply don't see any way back. And if we are just waiting for the World Cup because it's nice and it's neat and it's convenient, that's 2 weeks wasted in my mind.
I've a entirely unprovable theory on managers, and I think particularly in clubs like Rangers. Graham Murty was, he came across quite a pleasant guy, okay? But I think that one of the things that Gerrard brought was this passion. Gerrard wore his heart on his sleeve, and I think the Rangers support reacted to that. I think the Rangers support like that in their manager. They want a manager who's combative. They want a manager who they think is, if it's not going as it should be at half time, someone's being held by the throat up against a wall. Whether that's good management or not, I think that's what the support look for in a manager. They look for a guy who is passionate, who is emotional, who expresses that. And I think that's possibly something, I don't know if that's universal to all football, but I think you see that in British football. I think that's why guys like Klopp is so popular, and even Guardiola is so popular, because they are emotional people. You see their emotion, it comes out of them. Alex Ferguson was another one. And I think that's one of the things that's going against Van Bronckhorst just now, is that he is calm. He is a calm individual. You rarely see him ruffled. You rarely see him angry. And I think that the support actually struggled to relate to him a little bit because of that. You knew when Walter Smith was angry. You knew that. You could see it. You could see it in the interview. You could hear it in his voice. You could hear it in the questions the questioner, the interviewer was asking him. They were choosing their words very carefully because they didn't want to set off the volcanic temperament. And I actually think that's one of the things that's going against Van Bronckhorst just now, is that we're not seeing that. He doesn't seem to be as angry at things as we are. And I think that's going against him. Anyway, Patrick, Ross kind of set me up there. the board and Ross Wilson in particular have also been getting some criticism from supporters. As we said earlier, Van Bronckhorst can only pick the players he's got. He can't pick players that aren't fit. He can't pick players we've never signed. Is it fair to aim criticism at them, or should Van Bronckhorst be getting more out of this squad? The ones that are fit, as Ross said there, that team that went out today on paper was good enough to beat St Johnstone. Does the buck stop with Van Bronckhorst, or do you think there are people, other people at the club who are equally, if not more, culpable?
There's plenty of blame to go around, and I think if you look at Twitter's the sort of ecosystem of fans, you've seen that it's been disseminated far and wide. So I think almost every stakeholder involved in the club, and I think rightfully so. I think if you look sort of response to the question, I think there's a few examples of Van Bronckhorst not utilising his squad properly. Obviously, this is sort of my opinion, and you can sort of take offence to that. But
I'm only looking for your opinion. You fire away with your opinion, Pat.
I think,
believe me, that in the comments there's loads of other people's opinions, and so you go for yours.
I think the inability to bed in Yilmaz quick enough was a poor decision. I think he came in and the entire time in Besiktas spell, he was impressive, he was progressive. I understand the concerns about someone young moving abroad. I've done it a few times in my life, but this is a footballer, and he showed in the spells, or at least in the first 2 months when he was playing, that he was capable, and Barisic was fine, but I think that was one big, obviously, because Yilmaz sort of fits the profile of what you wanted in a fullback for Van Bronckhorst as well. So it was almost this perhaps paradoxical element where he was playing someone or pigeonholing someone who doesn't really fit a system for someone who doesn't, then they're lying on the bench. And that was a considerable amount of outlay that came into acquiring the asset, upwards of 5 million if all the conditions are met. Playing Tillman on the left just doesn't work, or left of a midfield three, because he's right-footed. He has much better interplay with Tavernier and whoever's on the right wing. And I think one that's perhaps divides the support, but I would have just played Sakala a lot earlier. I think he's a numbers man. He gets us what we need. We've talked about our inability to create chances and score. He remedies that to an extent. I also think perhaps the treatment of Morelos, especially last season, and running him to the ground to a certain extent, and then the inability to sort of use him now per se, especially when this game and Livingston hasn't been great. That's not been perhaps optimal management, but of course it's not just him. I think emblematic of that is if we were to get our number one manager target, I don't think we'd expect him to go in and win the league or win out the rest of the season, because there are fundamental shortcomings in this squad. It's by far and away the second best squad in Scotland. So I don't think you can expect a manager to come in and win the league or do much more. Obviously, progression is an expectation, and we'll need to benchmark on the basis of when we get a new manager. If we do, you'd expect that to be soon. Some would have expected it as being before this podcast is on, maybe on an interim basis. But yeah, I don't think the recruitment has been great. I don't sort of stand with the orthodoxy that the recruitment in the summer was poor. I think Yilmaz was a good bit of business. I think Ben Davies was quite good. Tom Lawrence as well, albeit injured. I would have also signed Suter on a Bosman. We haven't seen him much, but I think that made sense. I think the majority of the blame, or perhaps the confusion, lies in the contract extensions, and perhaps most criminally the inability to sell assets at peak value. I understand it's quite difficult in hindsight's 2020 to say we should have ripped the squad up after 55. I wouldn't go to that extent, but I think the inability to sort of refresh and sell our heroes when their values are highest that sort of come to bite us. And I think I wrote in February 2021 that our inability to move on players might put us in a sort of period of stagnation, and here it lies in that we're in that period.
You touched upon something there, Patrick, which I've been meaning to ask you. Is there any league in Europe? By all means, say I've no idea, John. I don't know why you're asking me. But is there any league in Europe where the team that has the biggest budget doesn't win the league?
Well, I mean, we've seen in Norway the last 2 years, Bodo Glimt won, whereas Molde have twice the budget, albeit this year Molde are winning the league. So that's a good example. I'm going to try and think off the top of my head. We're going to have to obviously look outside of the sort of traditional powerhouses, because emblematic of football in the modern day, the top 5 leagues are all dominated by the biggest spenders. Poland, Rakow, Częstochowa are going to win the league this year. They're quite clear. They were a second division team just 3 years ago. Their manager has won the Polish Cup. They're going to win the league, and they have a budget around half of Legia Warsaw's and half of Lech Poznan's. And finally, we saw Dynamo Tbilisi in Georgia. They're going to win the league despite Dynamo Batumi have Chinese backers and fairly substantial transfer outlay. So those are three examples. They also are leagues in which don't have the sort of duopoly we have. Whereas we know, regardless of what we do, there will always be a good side on the other, good team on the other side of the city, and generally a great side. If you look at the last 10 years, at least relative to what we are. So it's perhaps not a burgeoning trend, but there are certain outliers in and around Europe across the continent in which we see a league in which a team with a material disadvantage is able to usurp that through tactics, player development, and whatnot. And I think that's probably one of the ways we can filter down managerial targets is by looking at those teams who have managed to do so.
Okay, interesting. Ross, if you can keep your head while all around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Football's an emotional game. We've spoken about that. That's what makes it what it is. That's why we're here. That's why we give up our Sunday nights to do this. We overreact to victories and to defeats. That's part of the fun of it. But how easy is it for the players, for the managers, for the directors to ignore this growing unrest? And particularly the online stuff, which tends to be nastier and more instant. How easy is it for them to ignore that and focus on the next match?
It can't be easy at all to ignore that. But also, nor should they. Social media and I guess the digital landscape in which we operate today is so different and far removed from 30 years ago, say, where it was really a case of get the paper on a Sunday morning and see what a journalist thinks about it. Now everyone has their platform and everyone can scream their thoughts into the void. Not just as the void, if the person you want to scream at is on Twitter, you can scream at them on Twitter. So it's a really different landscape today, which makes it very, very, very difficult to ignore. But what that also means is that the club have the best barometer in the world because they have direct feedback at all times. And that is, of course, intermingled with utter lunacy, both from our side and from all other sides of the footballing sphere that want to get involved. But it means that whether that's through the supporters liaison officer or through the social media guys that run the Rangers club channel, they can directly feedback the temperature of the support. The temperature of the support at this point is very, very high, and the club needs to take note of that. Now, what I guess the next question: what's the right thing for the players to do? Should the players take note of that? Will that affect their performance? Should they try and drown it all out and focus on the next game? I suppose so. The players need to be. The players are paid a huge amount of money by us, ultimately putting money into season tickets and merchandise and whatnot. That goes to pay their salaries. They, I believe, owe us. They have an obligation to us to work hard in training in the gym and on match days. So I wouldn't want them to ignore the opinions of supporters, because we will be here long after this. It's such a cliche, and I apologise for using it, but we as supporters we've been here long before these players, these directors, these managers, and we will be here long after. So it can't be easy. On a personal level, the amount of abuse that they will take, the things that they will read, it must be very, very difficult for those individuals, for their families. And we all have a responsibility to utilise our own personal platforms in a responsible way. But I go back to the point I made earlier. The club have never had it so easy to take the temperature of the room. And I really sincerely hope that they do that and take the right action.
Taking the temperature of the room, Patrick, another poor result on Wednesday would be a serious problem for the club. I think they would be, I think so far the support at Ibrox has been largely supportive. There's been some boos at half-time, there's been some boos when things haven't been going well, but frankly the best Rangers sides have had that. We've not had October 1983. We haven't had that yet. But I have a feeling if things don't go well against Hearts, we might have. I think there is a growing frustration in the support that Ross articulated there. That said, are Hearts exactly the right type of club for us to be playing on Wednesday? Hearts tend to not be quite as defensive as Motherwell and St Johnstone and teams like that. They tend to come and try and win the match. They tend to be a little more progressive in their play. They're also having another one of these kind of funny seasons. They won today with 10 men. From what I gather, most of the match, they still managed to win the game. They lost to Aberdeen the week before. They've been hammered in Europe. They're having a funny season. They kind of win one, draw one, lose one. It's that kind of season. Is this exactly the kind of game that Rangers need? Is Hearts on Wednesday night at home? Could we have picked a better team? We beat them 4-0 not that long ago when we played them at Tynecastle. This strikes me as being an awfully good opportunity for the players and for the manager to try and put a line in the sand on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I certainly think it is a good canvas for us to bounce back. But I think it's an interesting one. I think you can hear the discord from the Hearts fans that they are in sort of a similar position to us, in which they're hamstrung by a series of injuries to key personnel. Craig Halkett, Stephen Kingsley, Kyle Rowett, their top three centre-backs, all have been injured for a good chunk of the season. But they are sort of grinding out results, not performances. I think their position in the table is a false position, and we'll see them sort of perhaps drop down a bit, albeit they do not have Europe anymore, so that first side, who have a small squad, will be a massive difference. But if you look at the game against Motherwell today and Ross County last week, they were the worst team out of the two, both anecdotally from the Hearts sporting friends I have, and if you look at the stats, the XG, shots on target, possession, field tilt, all sort of portrayed a picture in which Hearts were lucky to come away with 3 points, maybe even 1 point in situations. My brother does some net rating stuff every week on the SPL, and it shows that Hearts are the second worst defence in the league, albeit the fourth best offence. So I think this is a good opportunity for us, in which that they're going to likely come out to attack, in the sense that that's how they play. They might not do so to the same extent that we saw at home, just because they are wary that a draw is a fantastic result for Hearts going to Rangers. We saw it last year with the last minute winner they got. Craig Halkett scored after McGregor sort of fumbled it. But I think they'll probably take on a more pragmatic approach, play more defensive, try and play for the draw. And ultimately, they might see the fact that playing Rangers at this point and at this juncture in the season is the perfect time to play us. I think we might see three gentlemen on a Hearts podcast asking the same question. Is this the best time to play Rangers? On the basis that Hearts have been sort of outperforming their means. They'll be getting good results on the basis of poor performances. And perhaps they'll expect themselves to revert, put in a good performance and win. And this Rangers side does not look good. We struggled against St Johnstone, we struggled against Livingston. We've been picked out of Europe much like Hearts have. So I think the question is, obviously, I think Hearts are a good team to play at this point because they are quite leaky at the back, sort of hyperbolized by injuries. So we should score, and that's been our big problem. We've been a good defence, if not perhaps up there with Celtic neck and neck as the best defence. I know if you look at just pure goal difference, they beat us, but expected goal difference, we're quite better than them, especially in these last few weeks, and they've been hemorrhaging goals to an extent, albeit most of them have been on the basis of the penalty spot, which is an interesting anecdote to take after VAR's been implemented. But I do think this should be, obviously, we need to win every game at home, but I don't understand or if we lose or draw against Hearts, if the manager's sort of not resigned or left after the 90 minutes, what would be the proverbial straw to break the camel's back? And I think even if we do put in a good performance on against Hearts, I think we'd mentioned earlier, it's perhaps just delaying the inevitable. I think there's sort of season-long and year-long trends which have suggested that this isn't going to work. So perhaps putting in a good performance against Hearts will be a false flag. And I don't want to suggest that or talk bad about the Ibrox support, that people will want to see us lose on the basis of Gio going out. But I do think that if they leave the on the 90th minute, maybe me as well, that the sort of ends justify the means. And if we lose in order to get Gio out to bring someone more productive in and progressive, that might be worth it in the short and the long term.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a difficult one, that, isn't it? You never want to see Rangers lose, and at this stage of the season, you know, there's still all to play for, and I've seen seasons twist and turn. I've seen us been further behind in the league than we are just now. So there will be more twists and turns this season. I was going to take us on to another topic, but I think we're going to be out of time. So just very quickly, guys, next Sunday night, how many points have Rangers gained in the two final games before the World Cup? And is Van Bronckhorst still in charge? What do you think, Ross?
I think we'll have gained 6 points. I think he will still be in charge. And I think most of us will still have the same frustrations that we do this evening.
Patrick?
Yeah, I am in complete agreement with everything Ross said. I don't think the needle will be pushed. I think regardless of performances, we'll probably see 6 points, but no one will be overjoyed. They'll be delaying the inevitable. And I hope, knock on wood, that we will take the time and the contingencies over the World Cup break to perhaps poach someone, but that's best laid plans, and I'm not exactly sure if I expect that.
I mean, I think part of the issue is there isn't an obvious person in the wings. There's not an ex-club legend who's doing very well at another club just now who could be coming. You know, there's not an obvious person. There's not another Scottish manager just now who's doing, you know, a great job at another club where you could, you know, realistically look and say, you know what, that guy's doing really well. He would do well to come in here. There isn't an obvious candidate, and that, you know, and I really don't want to sit here and say, you know, say anything negative about Van Bronckhorst, because his team last season gave me some of the most enjoyable evenings of my Rangers supporting life. But you know, it would be ridiculous of us not to speculate on who is a likely appointment, because that's me. I'm scratching my head. I just don't know who. You know, for me, there isn't an obvious one. It's unlikely to be somebody from his backroom. I don't think that's going to happen. I can't see Gerrard coming back. You know, he's obviously out of work just now, but I can't see him coming back. I think that's been done. People have said, what about Michael Beale? Michael Beale just turned down I don't know how many millions of pounds to go to the English Premier League. I can't see what's changed in the 12 months since he left that would entice him back. He's doing okay at QPR. He's a chance to break them up. So I can't see that happening. So I just don't see who the obvious replacement is. And I guess that must be a factor in all this. There is no point in replacing him. There's no point. What I think would be a mistake is if we found ourselves going through a prolonged period without a manager. If you cast your mind back a couple of seasons, 3 seasons or 4 seasons ago, then when before Gerrard came in, and we were you know, these closing doors moments, sliding doors moments where we were in pursuit of Derek McInnes. And you do look back and think, well, I wonder what would have happened if we'd got him. I wonder how these podcasts would have gone over the last 3 years. I don't think we'd have made any European finals. That's for certain. But you know, anyway, none of us will know. But I don't think that's in anybody's interests to have a prolonged period without a manager. And again, that might be something that goes in Van Bronckhorst's favour. Is there anyone jumping out at you, Patrick? Anyone jumping out at you, Ross, that you think that's the guy we should be going for? He's the obvious candidate, because I don't have an obvious candidate. I can't see who the most likely candidate would be.
No, I definitely think there's no perfect candidate, on the basis that there's no one that sort of provides a harmony for the 10 camps that we see, sort of fundamentally splitting who we want for the next manager. There'll be some requirements that just clash ideologically with different sort of parts of the supporter group. Some want a Scottish manager, some want a British manager, some would turn their heads to managers who don't understand the sort of dynamics, both cultural, social, economically, of the old firm. I naturally will take a bit of a left field approach. There's a few coaches I like, but again, all of them involve risk. But you're going to have to leverage risk somewhere, because just on the basis of where we are as a club compared to 20 years ago. And on the basis that if we try to get someone mid-season, a lot of managers, rightfully so, will sort of look at the contract they have and be like, I want to see it out, maybe perhaps end the season. Michael Beale's a perfect example. He both turned down Wolves and then did this really nice video, 15 minutes addressing the QPR Sport about how he was there, committed to his players, his fans and his staff. And you're not going to expect him to then do that video and then turn around and leave in 2 weeks' time. And I think...
Oh, Patrick, I've lost track of the number of times I've heard managers say, no, I couldn't leave this club. And then, 6 months later, he's either been fired by that club or he's joined their biggest rivals as manager. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I'm thinking with pure morals, but I don't see him...
Listen, don't worry about that. I don't think they exist in football, to be quite frank.
Fair. I don't think there's any sort of mutualistic candidate which unites everyone. And I do think that will perhaps delay our entrance to the market, just because I think there was broad support for Van Bronckhorst last year from the fans, but I do think we were rushed into it on the basis of a sort of pragmatic approach, just get someone, because our hand was pushed. We didn't let go of Gerrard. He was taken from us, per se. That doesn't suggest I'd want him back in any sort of capacity, but I think we need to an extent, take our time, obviously, and get the candidate as close to the perfect candidate as there is, even though it is a bit of a myth. Even at the best of times, there is no perfect candidate. I think it's completely sort of dependent on how you see this season going out. I'm sort of at the point where I don't think we'll win the league, so my ability to sort of delay the decision is fine. I don't think if we bring someone in tomorrow, that's going to change our chances of winning the league much. I don't think it moves the needle. I think Celtic win the league probably 80 out of 100 times. So I'm fine with delaying it, sort of taking the season as one that will not go down in history books for us in order to get the right person to set us up for a progressive, sustainable 3 or 4 years.
Ross?
Yeah.
That all sounds very sensible. But come on.
It does. I'm more emotional.
You can't be having that. You can't be having us ending on that note.
No, but I'm really anxious and nervous to even suggest the name, because Patrick will have some kind of statistical database as to why that person would be completely incompatible. But what I can do is I can look at some of the names. And I'm sorry, I know we're running over a bit, so I'll be very, very brief. Some of the names that have been mentioned: Sean Dyche, not for me. I can't think of anyone more categorically diametrically opposed to the style of football that we should be playing. So no, thank you. I'll butcher the pronunciation, but Kjetil Knutsen over at Bodo Glimt. I guess the success that he's had there is always going to attract. And I wonder if you can maybe draw parallels with the journey that Graham Potter went on. So
my worry is Ronnie Dial. Yeah. Whatever the hell you say his name. He seemed to have a similar profile when he went to Celtic.
Yes, I'd take that point as well. It's possibly one that not many of us know enough about, but have either fall into two camps of going, well, he's won the league with a restricted budget and a kind of nobody team, so that sounds great, compared to Scandinavian football, and I don't really know anything about him, so no thank you. He's one of these guys that maybe he would be a good fit for us, but there is risk in that appointment. I've seen the Maccabi Haifa manager being linked in the last couple of days in the press, particularly coming from the Israeli press. Probably the Kjetil Knutsen scenario, but kind of on speed. Like, again, could be great, but very, very high risk. I don't think any of us know much about him other than that he's won a couple of leagues out in Israel. I'm going to be such an arsehole about this, but the one that does interest me is what's happened in Southampton this afternoon. Their manager allegedly is getting the sack over either this weekend or in the lead up to the World Cup. I'm a fan of his. I feel that he's done well.
Who is he?
That's Ralph Hasenhüttl. Was out in Germany and it did well at Southampton, albeit with some absolutely monumental scuddings over the past few years, a couple of 9-0s. But I think there's a lot going on in the background at Southampton that makes them a bit of a difficult place at the moment. So what I do think is that given if we were to make a managerial change, we will surely be paying some kind of compensation or payoff to Gio and his backroom team. Therefore, I believe it would be very unlikely that we would get a manager who's currently contracted to another club. I think that we are looking at the out-of-work managers. And and that limits the pool. So, look, but that being said, I suspect we would be pleasantly surprised at the number and variety of Stevies that made their way to Ibrox, where the vacancy to be announced. So just because we can't sit here and the three of us come up with a name that we would all universally agree on, I don't think that means we shouldn't be pulling the trigger, personally.
Sounds like David Martindale is in the frame to me there, Ross. That sounds like
I would love that. I would absolutely love it.
Look, thanks for your time tonight, guys. Appreciate you giving up your Sunday evening. Appreciate you managing to form coherent sentences underneath the seethe that I think we're probably all feeling after this afternoon's disappointment. Just to remind everybody that the podcast is available on Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and Spotify. So you can listen to it on a variety of different platforms. David Fraser and Scott have got a preview show during the week, which I thought was on Friday the 11th, but might actually be on Tuesday before the Hearts game. So I do apologise. I am not a real presenter. I'm a stand-in presenter. So all of the mistakes you've heard tonight, including this one, are fully on me. Anyway, they're either going to preview the Hearts game or they're going to look back in the Hearts game, one of the two. But no doubt there'll be other things to speak about this week. So please find out when they're on. Follow Frankie on social media. He'll let you know. And lastly, do come on to Gersnet, go on to the forum, and read through the history archive and everything else about it. Thanks for listening tonight or on catch up. I hope you found it of some cathartic value, if nothing else. Patrick, Ross, thanks for giving up your time again. Thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate you giving to us. And I'll say good night to everyone. Thanks.